Caleb Dunn yanked the reins without thought. It wasn't him who saw it first, but the mare. Ears pinned back, nostrils flared, trembling like something unholy had stirred the dust. A lone cottonwood stood twisted by wind and time at the edge of Dry Gulch, its limbs brittle and reaching. Beneath it, something hung. It turned slowly in the breeze. A shape, a shadow with legs too small, arms too thin. Caleb's stomach dropped like a lead sinker. He kicked his boot out of the stirrup and stepped down, boots crunching dry earth. The wind sighed, just enough to swing the body. A girl, young, Apache, neck limp, hair hanging like black river weed, dress torn, feet bare. A rope dug into the bark above, straining against her weight. Around her neck swung a sign, painted in slashes of red. "White man shows no mercy." The words bled down the grain of the wood. Caleb didn't move. The silence was too deep, too unnatural. Even the buzzards circled wide, refusing to touch the air around that tree. Something was wrong, beyond what his eyes told. He stepped forward. A fly landed on her brow. She didn't flinch, but there was color in her lips still. Her fingers curled slightly. The rope was cinched tight, but not enough to break the neck. Not dead. Not yet. "Damn you," Caleb muttered, voice hoarse as he reached for his knife. The blade sawed through the rope in seconds. She dropped into his arms, light as a rag bundle. She didn't cry, didn't stir, but her chest moved, a shallow, stubborn breath. He cradled her carefully and glanced around. Nothing, just the wind and the dust, and that awful sign swinging, creaking, laughing without a mouth. He carried her to the horse and swung up with her in his arms. The mare shifted under the weight, but obeyed. Behind him, the rope still danced from the limb. Then, a whistle, soft, distant, from the canyon. He looked, a glint, far off, between two rocks, a shadow that moved too slow for a bird, too tall for a bush. Watching, he didn't wait. He turned the horse and rode hard, leaving Dry Gulch and its silence behind. The ranch lay quiet when he reached it, the sun tilting westward, painting the buttes in blood-orange fire. He carried the girl into the root cellar beneath the old barn, a place where no eyes could find her, no sound carried far. Laid her down on an old cot where sacks of corn used to rest before the harvest failed and the storms came. She was burning up. Fever had already taken her skin. He fetched water from the pump, dipped a rag, and began to clean the wounds at her wrists, raw where rope had cut deep. She didn't stir. He found a patch of blue beadwork on her dress, torn but still bright. Someone had cared for this child once. He wiped her brow. "You hang on, little miss," he muttered. "Ain't your time yet." Upstairs, the sun dipped. Shadows crawled longer. That night, he sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees. The desert didn't breathe. Not a coyote, not a cricket. The only sound was wood popping inside the stove and the faint creak of that sign in his memory. He took a sip from the tin cup. The moon rose slow and gold. That's when he saw it, a spark, far off. Then two more. Faint orange flickers across the ridge. Campfires where no travelers belonged. He didn't sleep, just cleaned the rifle again and again until his fingers moved from habit, not thought. Before dawn, he crept back to the cellar. She was awake, eyes open, wide and dark. Watching him, didn't move, didn't blink. He crouched down slow. "You're safe," he said, low and dry. No answer, just breath. Just that stare. He set a small bowl of water beside her and a heel of bread. "You can rest here, long as you need. No one's going to touch you." She didn't reach for it. Didn't need to. Caleb saw it clear. This girl wasn't broken. She was waiting. Not a child anymore. A storm. And it was rising. The barn was already burning when Caleb rounded the last fence post. Flames spat out of the hayloft like a dragon's breath, licking the sky orange and black. Sparks snapped through the wind. The old board screamed as they curled inward. He dropped the water pail, drew his rifle, and scanned the dark. No riders. No hoofbeats. Just fire, and a message in heat. He didn't bother shouting. Whoever lit the match was long gone. From the cellar, a single muffled thump. Caleb ran. He tore the hatch open, smoke curling in after him, and found her crouched low behind the cot, eyes wide, knife in hand. the bread untouched, the water still full. He crouched beside her. "You stay here. Don't come up, no matter what you hear." She didn't nod, didn't blink, just gripped that little blade like it was a saber. He shut the hatch and slid the beam across it. Morning came with ashes floating through the yard like lazy snow. What was left of the barn smoldered quietly, black ribs of timber rising from the ruin. The old mare had kicked her way free of the stall and stood in the far pasture, flanks soaked with sweat. Caleb knelt at the fence line. Tracks. 3 horses at least. Heavy-set riders, judging by the depth, coming from the east and turning back the same way. He followed the trail to the gate, where a single .44 slug sat half-buried in the post. He plucked it out, turned it in his palm. No mistaking that mark, a shallow cross carved into the lead. Boone, Preacher Boone and his bastard men, riders out of Texas with their own warped gospel. Caleb didn't spit, didn't curse, just pocketed the slug and turned back toward the house. The girl was standing in the doorway, barefoot, a bandage wrapped loose around her wrist. Her eyes fixed on the barn, not shocked, not afraid, just watching the ruin. "You see him?" she asked. The first word she'd spoken. Caleb paused. "No." She nodded once, then walked back inside. Days passed dry and tight as a drum. She still didn't eat much, but she watched everything. The way Caleb tied knots, how he carried his rifle, where he stashed the shells. He noticed, and when he set up tin cans on the fence post and fired once to scare off a hawk, she flinched only once. By sundown, she was tracing her fingers over the Winchester's wornwood grip. "You ever shoot?" he asked. Her eyes didn't leave the rifle. "My father did." Caleb handed it to her. "Then you'll learn again." The next day, they went out past the ridge. Kins lined on stumps. He showed her how to breathe slow, to let the weight of the world sit still in her hands. Her first shot missed. Second hit the stump. Third hit the can. Square. Loud. She said nothing, just handed the rifle back like a promise had been made. That night, Caleb sat with the fire low, chewing dry beans and staring at nothing. "You were cavalry?" she asked. He looked up. She stood by the hearth, arms folded, shadows flickering over her face. He nodded. "Long time ago. Indian wars." Another nod. "Did you fight my people?" He didn't answer. The silence hung heavy. "Thought I was doing right," he said finally. "Thought I was helping win peace." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, "My mother was a healer. She never carried a blade. They burned her alive." Caleb didn't speak, didn't move. He just watched the fire die down and let her words soak through the floorboards. 2 nights later, the dogs barked. Caleb rose, rifle in hand, and stepped out onto the porch. A figure on horseback stood at the edge of the property, lit by moonlight, not hiding. It was Boone's man, the one called Cray. He held something in his hand. Threw it. It landed in the dirt with a dull thud. Caleb didn't move until Cray rode off. He stepped down, lifted the object, a small bundle wrapped in stained cloth. Inside, a broken doll, Apache style, and a second slug. Same carved cross. Back in the house, he set the bundle on the table. The girl looked at it, said nothing. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a tin cup and sat down. "I knew Boone during the war," Caleb muttered. He was the kind of man who liked to kill after the battle was already over. She touched the doll gently, as if it might still breathe. "He thinks you're protecting me." "I am." She looked up. "No, you're preparing me." A long silence. Then Caleb leaned forward. "When the time comes, you shoot to stop, not to scare, and not to hate. You understand?" Her fingers tightened on the doll's cloth. "I understand," she said. Outside, the wind shifted, and the tracks they left behind began to fill with red dust. Booth heels clacked on Bitter Ridge's main street as Caleb walked into the lion's den. Saloons murmured low. Doors hung open in the heat. Somewhere, a piano stalled mid-song. Every pair of eyes tracked the old man with a rifle slung casual across his back. Too casual. Boone's men leaned lazy on the porch rail outside the dusty spur. 4 of them. Grins like wolves. Fingers too close to belts. Caleb stepped up the wooden steps and into the saloon without a word. The air inside hung thick with heat and smoke and sweat. Laughter died the second the door creaked shut behind him. At the back of the room, beneath the mounted buffalo skull, sat Preacher Boone. Long black coat, shirt white as funeral cloth, cross of gold swinging on a silver chain, a Bible open in front of him like some back alley altar. He didn't stand, didn't smile, just said, "Brother Dunn, didn't expect you to come knocking." Caleb didn't sit. "You lit my barn," he said flat. Boone gave a soft chuckle and leaned back in his chair. "I reckon the wind did it. Fire's God's business. And justice, well, that belongs to men who ain't forgot who the enemy is." Caleb's jaw tensed. "You hang a child from a tree and paint it holy, you forfeit the right to preach." Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone stepped away from the wall. Fingers edged closer to iron. Boone waved a hand. "She's a blood-marked heathen, daughter of a witch. Apache vengeance runs in her veins. You think Takin her and washes away what she is." Caleb's voice dropped, hard as gravel. "She's a girl, no different than your own daughter might have been. Before fever took her." The room went still. Boone's face twitched, just once. Then, "You watch your tongue, Dunn." "I was there, Boone," Caleb said. "We both were. The burning village. The unarmed. You called it a message. You called this justice. But I saw your men carve crosses into the skin of children. I see the same mark in your bullets." Boone rose now, slow, taller than most, built like a gallows pole. "You're a traitor to your own, to God and white blood both." Caleb didn't blink. "You preach mercy, but all you've ever done is bury it." Boone's eyes flashed, and his hand dropped toward his belt. Behind the piano, a woman screamed. A thundercrack, the front window shattered. Boone's hand froze inches from his holster. Everyone turned. On the rooftop across the street stood the Apache girl. Bow drawn, arrow knocked, face painted red across the eyes. Silent, watching. The saloon held its breath. Boone's fingers curled slowly away from the gun. Caleb stepped backward toward the door. "She remembers," he said, "and she's not afraid of ghosts anymore." He left Boone standing there, jaw tight, pride cracking like old bone. That night, a storm brewed in the east. Wind came in sharp and strange, carrying the scent of blood and wet iron. At the ranch, Caleb checked the cellar. The girl was sharpening the flint tip of another arrow. Her face unreadable. "You sure?" he asked. She didn't look up, just nodded once. An hour before dawn, Caleb woke with a jolt. A creak. The porch. He moved quiet as a ghost himself, rifle already loaded. He stepped to the window. For shadows. They split, two circling the barn remains, one near the well, one creeping toward the front door. He didn't hesitate. The first fell with a single crack from the rifle, shoulder shattered, scream muffled by dirt. The others scattered, but before they could regroup, the girl struck. From behind the chimney, she loosed two arrows in silence. One man hit the dirt hard. Another crawled behind the rain barrel. The fourth turned to run, but Caleb was already there, shotgun raised. Boom, dust and blood and silence. Then nothing. Smoke. The wind. Cattle lowing, restless in the distance. Caleb walked among the fallen. Only one still breathing. He yanked the man up by the collar. It was Cray. Face slick with fear. "She ain't human," Cray stammered. "She ain't right. She watched my boys burn and smiled. She learned from the best," Caleb growled. Behind him, the girl approached. Cray's eyes widened. "No, no, please." The girl raised her bow. Caleb put a hand on her arm. "Not like this," he said quietly. "You already beat him." She held his gaze, then slowly lowered the weapon. Cray collapsed to his knees, sobbing. They left him there. The wind picked up again, and dust covered the blood. Later, before the sky turned gold, Caleb sat on the porch, cleaning his gun. The girl stood beside him, silhouetted by the rising sun. "We ride today?" she asked. He looked up. "To town," he said. "We finished this." She nodded. "No mercy," she said. He met her eyes. "No," he said softly. "Justice." Boots hit the dust before the town clock struck 8. Caleb and the girl stood at the edge of Bitter Ridge, just where the desert met the boards. Their horses waited behind them, still as grave markers. The wind carried a dry hush, as if the land itself was holding breath. Main Street was lined with rifles. Boone's men stood along rooftops, porches, and windows. 40 feet ahead, in the center of the road, Boone himself waited, coat billowing like a preacher at judgment. His golden cross gleamed in the rising light. The same crooked smile etched his face, the one carved from fire and sermons and blood. "You came," Boone called, spreading his arms like a prophet. "Old dog, new tricks, and the red devil by your side." Poetic. Caleb didn't move. The girl stood beside him, face painted, bow at her back, revolver holstered low on her hip. No one spoke. Even the sheriff stood on the boardwalk like a ghost, hat in hand, mouth tight. Boone spat. "You brought hell to my town, Dunn. To your town. And for what? A war orphan who should have hung? There's no justice in this." Caleb stepped forward. "I didn't come for justice." Boone raised a brow. "No." Caleb's voice cut clean through the morning air. "I came to bury a lie." Boone's hand dropped toward his belt, smooth, practiced, but he didn't draw. "I should have killed you when the treaties burned," he said. "You did," Caleb said. "A dozen times." The girl stepped forward. Just one step. Just enough. Boone's jaw twitched. "You think they'll side with you? You think these people will protect an old traitor and a savage child?" He turned to the watching crowd. "Tell me, anyone of you going to take their side? Any of you going to lift a hand for the men who murdered your kin? For the tribes that raided your land? You know who she is. She's the girl from Dry Gulch. She's the one we marked." Silence. Then, from the far end of the street, a man stepped forward, gray-bearded, a livery hand. "I lost a son in the raids," the man said, voice steady. "But that girl ain't the one who strung up children." Boone's hand tightened. Another voice. A woman this time. "I seen the sign you left on her, Boone. Same kind you nailed on my cousin's cabin in '71. I know your cross." The crowd shifted. One by one, guns lowered. Men looked away. Boone turned, fury cutting across his face. "You faithless bastards." Caleb stepped forward again. "Close now. 10 paces. Only thing left is you, Boone." The preacher's lip curled. He drew. Fast, but not fast enough. The girl's hand flashed. The shot rang once. Boone staggered, a red bloom opening across his chest, dead center where the cross used to hang. He dropped to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief. "You?" The girl stepped forward slowly, revolver still smoking. "You showed no mercy," she said. "But we did." Boone fell face first into the dust. Behind him, the wind caught a loose plank on the general store. It creaked and banged against the wall like the echo of an old gallows. An hour later, Boone's body lay in a pine box outside the church. The girl took the sign from her satchel, the one they had cut from her neck. "White man shows no mercy." She nailed it to the coffin lid. No words, just the hammer and the sound of something old ending. They say Caleb Dunn never returned to Bitter Ridge after that. Some say he settled further west. Others claim he died beneath a tree in silence, like an outlaw saint. But the girl? They say she rides still, bow on her back, fire in her blood. A whisper through the arroyos. A ghost with skin and fury. Some say she brings vengeance. Others say she brings peace. But all agree on one thing. She was the mercy they never expected.